The station called Veyrun Reach hung quietly at the edge of the Calm Belt, a stretch of space where 3 star nations had agreed, long ago, not to fight. It was a neutral place. Traders stopped here. Refugees stopped here. Old ships that had nowhere else to go stopped here too. Commander Vex Serena had served on Veyrun Reach for 11 years. She was Korathi, a species with long limbs, gray-blue skin, and large black eyes built for reading light in dim places. She had seen many strange ships arrive at her station. She had seen pirates, smugglers, and diplomats. She had seen ships so old they should not have still been flying, held together by nothing but stubbornness and prayer. She had never seen a human ship, not once, in 11 years. Humans were a story more than a people, at this edge of the galaxy. Everyone had heard of Earth. Everyone had heard how the Virith Dominion had come out of the dark 40 years ago and burned it, along with every colony humanity had built. The story always ended the same way. Humanity was gone. A few ships had escaped, maybe. Nobody really knew. Nobody had proof. It was the kind of story spacers told each other late at night, half history and half ghost tale. So when the censor officer, a small quiet Athani named Mira Thale, called out from her station with a voice that cracked in the middle, Vex Serena did not expect what came next. "Commander," Mira said, "I have a contact. It's, Commander, I need you to see this." Vex walked over. The screen showed a single ship, far out at the edge of scanner range, moving slowly toward the station. Its engine trail was thin and unsteady, like a candle about to go out. "Species?" Vex asked. Mira's hands were shaking slightly on the console. "Hull design does not match anything in our database. Not Virith, not Coalition, not Ashlight Standard. I ran it against the old archive files, the ones from the war records 40 years back. And it's human, Commander. The design matches human colony ship blueprints, old blueprints, pre-war." For a moment, nobody on the bridge said anything at all. Vex Serena had grown up on stories about the humans, like everyone else. Some said they were extinct. Some said a handful had survived, hiding somewhere no one could find them. Some old traders swore they'd seen a human once, in some far port, buying parts for a ship that flew like nothing else in the sky. Vex had never believed those traders. Now she was not so sure. "Bring up a channel," she said. "Let's not guess. Let's ask." The ship was called the Ashen Cradle. That was the name it gave, in a voice that came through the comm system, rough and tired, like someone who had not slept in a very long time. "This is the Ashen Cradle, requesting entry to Veyrun Reach," the voice said. It was a woman's voice, human, careful with her words, like she was choosing each one before she let it out. "We are unarmed. We are damaged. We are asking for shelter, and nothing more." Vex Serena leaned toward the comm panel. "This is Commander Vex Serena, Veyrun Reach Station Authority. State your identity and your business." There was a pause, then the voice came back, quieter. "My name is Captain Elena Voss. I am the last captain of the Ashen Cradle, out of what was once the Sol system. We have been traveling a long time, Commander. Our engines are failing. Our hull has taken damage we cannot repair on our own. We ask only for a place to stop, to fix what is broken, and to rest. We will not stay longer than we must." Vex glanced at Mira, who was staring at her screen with wide eyes. On the station's viewport, far off, the little ship kept crawling closer, its thin engine trail flickering. "How many souls aboard?" Vex asked. Another pause, longer this time. "That is a complicated question, Commander," Elena Voss said. "I would rather answer it in person, if you will let us dock." It was not a good answer. Vex had commanded this station long enough to know that a complicated answer to a simple question usually meant trouble. But there was something in the woman's voice that was not lying. It was tired. It was careful. It did not sound like the voice of someone hiding a weapon behind their back, ready to strike. It sounded like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and simply wanted to put it down. "Hold your position at the outer marker," Vex said. "We will run standard scans before granting dock clearance. This is not an insult, Captain Voss. It is procedure." "I understand," Elena Voss said. "Scan whatever you need to. We have nothing to hide that scanning will reveal quickly. But Commander, please, be patient with what you find. It will take time to explain." The channel closed. Vex Serena stood still for a moment, looking at the small, broken ship on the screen. Be patient with what you find. That was a strange thing to say to someone about to run a scan. She had heard smugglers try to talk their way past inspection with clever words. This did not sound like that. This sounded like a warning, kindly meant. Mira, she said, begin deep scan. Full spectrum. I want to know everything about that ship before it gets within 1,000 kilometers of my station. The ashen cradle drifted at the outer marker, waiting, while Veyrun Reach's sensor array reached out with invisible fingers of light and radiation to feel every part of it. The first readings came back fast, and they were sad readings. The ship's outer hull was scarred in 100 places, patched with metal that did not match, welded by hands that had clearly been working with whatever scraps they could find. Its main engine was running at less than a third of its rated output. 2 of its 4 thruster pods were dead entirely. There were holes in the hull, sealed only by emergency foam, that had probably been made by weapons fire, though how long ago, the scans could not say. This ship should not be flying, Mira said, half to herself, as the data scrolled past. By every reading I have, this ship should have died decades ago. But it didn't, Vex said quietly. No, Mira agreed, it didn't. The ship was enormous, far larger than its outer shape first suggested. Sensor techs on Veyrun Reach were used to ships built for trade or war, with clear, practical layouts. Cargo bays, engine rooms, weapon mounts, crew quarters. The ashen cradle did not fit any of those patterns. Its interior was a maze of decks and corridors that seemed to serve no obvious military or trade purpose. There were vast open spaces deep inside the hull, shielded behind layers of armor thicker than anything on the outer skin. Why would you armor the inside more than the outside? Mira asked, frowning at her readouts. That makes no sense for a warship. It makes no sense for a cargo ship either. Vex had a guess already forming in her mind, one she did not like. Unless the outside was never meant to survive, she said slowly. Unless the outside is armor they were willing to lose, and the inside is the only part they truly needed to protect. Mira looked up at her. Protect what, Commander? That, Vex said, is what I want your scan to tell me. It took almost 2 hours for the deep scan to finish gathering enough data to paint a real picture of what lay inside the ashen cradle. 2 hours, in which Vex Serena stood on her bridge, watching the small crippled ship hang motionless against the stars, feeling a weight settle slowly onto her chest that she could not explain. When the picture finally came together, Mira Thale went very still. Commander, she said, you need to see this. Vex crossed the bridge to Mira's station. On the screen was a cutaway image of the ashen cradle, built from the scan data, showing deck after deck stacked deep inside the battered hull. Near the front of the ship, behind the scarred outer plating, were rows and rows of small enclosed chambers. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, stacked in long lines that ran the length of the ship. Each one glowed faintly on the scan, with the soft signature of active life support. Cryopods, Mira said. Commander, I'm reading life signs. Human life signs. Thousands of them. Vex stared at the screen. Thousands of humans, sleeping, carried across the dark, for who knew how many years, in a ship held together with scrap metal and prayer. It should have been impossible. It should have been enough of a shock on its own. It was not the part of the scan that made Mira's voice shake. There's more, Mira said. She pointed to a section deeper in the ship, below the rows of sleeping colonists, sealed behind armor 3 times thicker than anywhere else on the vessel. Commander, I don't know how to explain this reading. I've never seen anything like it. Vex leaned closer. Deep in the belly of the ashen cradle, behind walls that would have shrugged off a direct hit from a coalition warship, the scanners had found something that did not fit any pattern in Veyrun Reach's database. Rows of dense metal shapes, silent and cold, arranged with a precision that spoke of military design. Weapon signatures too many to count cleanly on a first pass. Power cores, dormant but massive, humming faintly at the very edge of detection, like something sleeping with one eye open. Commander, Mira said, very quietly. I think that's a fleet. I think there is an entire fleet, folded up and hidden, inside that one broken little ship. Vex Serena looked at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked out through the viewport, at the small, scarred vessel drifting patiently at the outer marker, engines barely holding together, asking for nothing more than a place to rest. "Get me Captain Voss," she said. "Now." When the channel opened again, Vex did not waste time with pleasantries. "Captain Voss," she said, her voice carefully flat, "my sensors are showing thousands of life signs aboard your ship, in cryogenic suspension. They are also showing a considerable quantity of what I can only describe as military hardware, hidden behind heavy armor, deep in your hull. I would like you to explain both of those things to me, before I make any decision about docking clearance." There was a silence on the other end. Not a guilty silence, Vex thought. A tired one. The kind of silence that came before someone finally set down a burden they had carried alone for far too long. "You found the children," Elena Voss said at last. Her voice had changed. It was softer now, and it trembled at the edges. 3,200 of them, Commander. The youngest colonists of what used to be humanity. Some of them were only babies when we sealed the pods. They have been asleep for 38 years. Vex felt something tighten in her chest that had nothing to do with military caution. And the rest? The hardware? Elena Voss was quiet again, just for a moment. "That," she said, "is why we are still alive to ask you for shelter at all, Commander Serena. I will tell you the whole truth, all of it, if you will let me dock. But I promise you this, everything sleeping in the deep hold of my ship exists for one purpose only, to make sure nobody ever finishes what the Virith Dominion started 40 years ago." Vex looked again at the small ship on her screen, and at the sleeping fleet folded inside it like a blade hidden in a beggar's coat. "Hold your position," she said quietly. "I'm calling the Concord Council. This is no longer a decision I can make alone." The channel went silent, and out at the marker, the ashen cradle drifted on, patient, wounded, and waiting, carrying its sleeping children and its sleeping storm through the dark together, as it had for 38 long years. Veyron Reach was not run by one commander alone. It belonged to the Ashlight Concord, a loose alliance of 3 peoples who had built the Calm Belt together after their own wars had nearly ruined them. The Korathi, tall and careful, who valued order above almost everything. The Ithani, small and quick-minded, who had built most of the sensor technology every ship in the region relied on. And the Doruan, broad and slow-spoken, whose ancestors had once been warriors, and who now preferred peace so strongly that they rarely spoke of the old days at all. Each people kept a seat on the station council, and it was to this council that Vex Serena now brought her report. The council chamber was a round room near the heart of the station, lit by soft blue light that was meant to keep tempers calm. It rarely worked. Tonight, with the images of the Ashen Cradle's scan results hanging in the air above the central table, it worked even less than usual. 3,200 sleeping humans, said Dorun Elder Bren Kolath, his voice a low rumble as he studied the glowing display. And beneath them, enough hidden weaponry to threaten a system. "Commander, I do not like the shape of this." "None of us like the shape of it," Vex answered. "But consider the other shape it could have taken. If that ship wished to harm us, it did not need to ask permission to dock. It did not need to sit patiently at our outer marker for 2 hours, while we scanned every centimeter of its hull. A ship that wanted a fight would have brought one already." "Or it wants us to lower our guard," said the Ithani representative, a sharp-eyed elder named Pelarun, "so that when it does dock, whatever sleeps in that deep hold wakes up inside our own station, where our own defenses would do us no good at all." Captain Voss offered an explanation, Vex said. "She has not given it yet. She asked to give it in person, once we allowed her to dock." "Convenient," muttered Pell. "Perhaps," Vex admitted. "Or perhaps it is simply true. I have read every old record this station holds on the Virith Dominion's war against Earth. I was a young officer when the reports first came through the trade routes. 40 years ago, entire fleets, entire cities, burned in a matter of months. If even a fraction of those reports were accurate, then any human who survived that war has good reason to build a hidden fleet inside a beggar's ship. Not to attack us, to protect what little is left of their people, in case the Dominion ever finds them again." Bren Kolath folded his large hands together on the table, thinking. "You believe her." "I believe her voice," Vex said carefully. "Which is a different thing from believing her completely. That is why I have not granted dock clearance. That is why I brought this to the council, instead of deciding alone. There was a long silence in the round chamber. Above the table, the image of the ashen cradle turned slowly, showing off its scars, its patched hull, its sleeping cargo of children and weapons both. What does she want in the end? Pell asked at last. Not the story, the actual request. Shelter, Vex said. Time to make repairs. Rest for whatever crew is still awake aboard that ship. She said they would not stay longer than they must. A pirate would say the same, Pell said. A pirate, Bren rumbled, does not usually carry 3,000 sleeping children as cargo, Pellaroon. Even the worst raiders I have known keep some things sacred. If this is a trick, it is a very strange one to build. Pell said nothing to that, though her sharp eyes stayed fixed on the display for a long moment before she looked away. Vex took the silence as her chance. I propose this, she said. We allow the Ashen Cradle to dock at Outer Berth 9, the farthest berth from the station core, with full station defense grids active around it, and weapons crews on standing alert. We allow Captain Voss and a small party to come aboard the station, to explain herself fully. We do not allow the ship's deep hold to be opened, nor its cryopods disturbed, until the Council is satisfied with what we hear. If at any point we judge the danger too great, we can seal the berth and hold the ship in place with the tractor array, until a Concord fleet can arrive. And if this explanation of hers turns out to be a lie, Pell asked, then we will already have the ship contained, its engines crippled, and a fleet on the way, Vex said. But I do not believe, Elder Arun, that a ship desperate enough to limp across half-known space on a third of its engine power, carrying its people frozen and its weapons silent, chose this moment, at this station, to begin a war it clearly could not win outright. Whatever else is true about that ship, it is not looking for a fight tonight. It is looking for a place to stop being afraid, even for a little while. Bren Kolath nodded slowly. I will vote with the commander. Pellaroon was quiet for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving once more to the slowly turning image above the table, to the small chambers glowing with life signs, thousands of them, sleeping children carried across the dark by a crew who had clearly given up almost everything else to keep them safe. I do not like it, she said finally, but I will not be the one who turns away 3,000 sleeping children because I was afraid of what slept beneath them. Docking is approved, under every safeguard the commander named, and no others removed without a full council vote. Back on the bridge, Vex Serena opened the channel once more. Captain Voss, she said, the council has voted. You are cleared to dock at Outer Berth 9, under station defense oversight. You and a party of your choosing may come aboard to explain your situation fully. Your deep hold will remain sealed, and your cryopods undisturbed, until we are satisfied. Do you accept these terms? There was the faintest sound on the other end of the channel, that might have been a breath let out after being held too long. We accept, Commander, Elena Voss said. Thank you. You do not know what this means to us. Perhaps not yet, Vex said, but I intend to learn. Bring your ship in slowly, Captain. My people are watching every centimeter of your approach, and they will not hesitate if given reason to. There will be no reason, Elena Voss said. I give you my word. The Ashen Cradle's engines flared weakly, and the broken little ship began its slow crawl toward Veyrun Reach, its patched hull catching the starlight in dull, uneven flashes, its 3,000 sleeping children, and its silent hidden fleet, drifting together toward the first safe harbor they had known in 38 years. Vex Serena watched it come, and felt, beneath her caution, something she had not expected to feel that day. Hope, small and careful, the way hope always was when it had good reason to be afraid of being wrong. Behind her, Mira Thale kept her eyes on the scanners, watching the sleeping weapons deep in the human ship's hold, waiting, as everyone on Veyrun Reach now waited, to learn exactly what kind of storm they had just invited through their door. The Ashen Cradle settled into Outer Berth 9, with a sound like an old man sitting down after a long walk, metal groaning, hull plates ticking as they cooled. Through the observation windows of Veyrun Reach, station workers gathered to watch the strange, battered ship lock into place, its scars catching the light of the docking clamps. Vex Serena stood at the airlock with a small honor guard, more for show than for real defense. True defense was the weapons crews standing ready throughout the station, and the defense grid humming quietly around the berth, ready to seal the Ashen Cradle inside a wall of energy at the first sign of trouble. When the airlock finally cycled open, only 3 people stepped through. The first was Elena Voss herself. Vex had expected someone older, worn down by 38 years of carrying the weight of a dying species. Instead, she found a woman, perhaps in her middle years, tall for a human, with gray threaded through dark hair, and lines around her eyes that spoke less of age and more of long nights spent awake, watching over things that could not watch over themselves. She wore a simple gray uniform with no rank markings, no flags, nothing that spoke of the nation that no longer existed. Behind her came a young man, barely more than a boy by human standards, introduced simply as Toma, who carried himself with the careful stillness of someone trained for combat, but trying very hard not to look it. And behind Toma came something that made Mirathale, standing near the back of the honor guard, let out a small, startled breath. It was not human, and it was not quite a machine either. It stood a little taller than Elena Voss, built of dull gray metal, with a single soft light where a face might be. It moved with a strange, careful grace, and it stayed close to Elena's side, the way a loyal animal might, or a bodyguard. "This is Watcher," Elena said, noticing the honor guard's stares. "An old friend. He has kept the ship running, and kept the children safe, longer than any of us have been alive to remember how. He means no harm to anyone here. I give you my word on that, as I have given it on everything else." Vex studied the machine for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Welcome to Veyroon Reach, Captain Voss. The council is waiting to hear what you promised to tell us." The council chamber felt smaller with 3 strangers standing inside it, though in truth, it was the same size it had always been. Bren Kolath watched the humans with careful, patient eyes. Pelaroon watched them with eyes that missed nothing. Vex Serena sat at the head of the table and waited. "Before I explain the ship," Elena Voss said, "I think you deserve to understand what happened to us. Not the short version the trade routes carry, the true one." "We are listening," Vex said. Elena Voss took a slow breath, the kind of breath a person takes before opening a door they have kept closed for a very long time. 40 years ago, she began, humanity was not a small people. We had Earth, and we had colonies scattered across nearly 30 systems. We were young among the stars compared to peoples like yours, but we were not weak, and we were not alone in believing we had time to grow. Then the Virith Dominion came, Pelaroon said quietly. It was not quite a question. Then the Virith Dominion came, Elena agreed. We had heard of them before, the way you hear thunder before you see the storm. Old ships spoke of a power moving through the far dark, conquering everything it touched, leaving behind worlds too broken to ever recover. We told ourselves it would never reach us. We told ourselves many foolish things in those years. She paused, and for a moment, her careful composure slipped, just slightly, before she pulled it back into place. They came to Seoul first, with what looked like an offer of peace, she continued. A single ship, asking to speak with our leaders about trade, about borders, about a future where our 2 peoples might share the dark without conflict. We were foolish enough, or perhaps simply hopeful enough, to let them close. 3 days after that ship arrived in orbit around Earth, their true fleet followed it through the same jump point. By the time anyone understood what was happening, it was already far too late to stop it. How many died? Bren Kolath asked, his low voice unusually gentle. Billions, on Earth alone, Elena said. The colonies fared little better. Some were burned outright. Others were left alive, only long enough to be stripped of anything useful, then abandoned to die slowly instead of quickly. In less than 8 months, the nation that had been humanity for thousands of years stopped existing in any form that mattered. The chamber was silent. Even Pelaroon, who trusted almost nothing, said nothing at all. I was a junior officer aboard a research vessel called the Meridian when Earth fell, Elena said. We were not built for war. We were built to study old ruins on the edge of human space, the kind of ancient structures every species finds eventually, built by people long gone before any of us existed. When the order came to evacuate anyone who could be saved, my ship was one of perhaps 40 that managed to escape the collapse with any passengers at all. We carried refugees, mostly children, because the adults who could still fight chose to stay behind and buy time for the ships to run. Vex Serena felt something cold settle in her chest. She had heard, distantly, of Earth's fall, the way one hears of a distant tragedy, sad but far away, belonging to someone else's history. Hearing it now, from someone who had lived inside it, made the distance collapse entirely. "What became of the other ships?" she asked. "The other 39. Elena Voss's jaw tightened. "Hunted, most of them. The Dominion does not simply conquer, Commander. It erases. Loose ends are not acceptable to them. Over the years that followed, we watched our sister ships vanish one by one, caught by Dominion patrols, betrayed by pirates paid in salvage rights, lost to accidents that were not truly accidents at all. By the 10th year, we believed the Meridian might be the last human ship still flying anywhere in known space. And yet you did not simply run and hide," Pelarune said, her sharp eyes narrowing. "You built a fleet. You built weapons enough to concern a Concorde scan array from across half a system. That does not sound like the choice of a people only interested in surviving quietly." "It is exactly the choice of a people only interested in surviving," Elena said, and for the first time there was steel in her voice. "Elder Arun, I do not expect you to understand what it is to watch your entire species reduced to a handful of ships running through the dark, hunted by something 1,000 times your strength. But I will tell you what 11 years of running taught us. Hiding alone does not work forever. Eventually, someone finds you, and when they find you, if you have nothing to defend yourself with, hiding was never anything but a slower way to die." She told them the rest slowly, over the better part of an hour, and the council listened without interrupting again. After the Meridian had run for 11 years, carrying its cargo of orphaned children deeper into the dark, its crew aging and its systems failing, they had found something unexpected on the edge of a dead system, no map claimed as anyone's territory. The wreck of an old Dominion research station, abandoned decades before the war with humanity had even begun, its databases still intact, untouched by anyone in all the years since. Inside those databases had been decades of advanced weapon and shield designs, technology the Dominion itself had once used to build the fleets that conquered Earth, later abandoned or replaced by something even worse. To desperate hands with nothing left to lose, it had seemed like a gift dropped from the stars themselves. "We did not build a fleet to conquer anyone, Elder Arun," Elena said. "We built it because for 11 years, we had watched our people die, simply for being found. We swore that if we were ever found again, we would at least be able to answer the question with something other than our own throats bared to the knife." "So, the Ashen Cradle is not the Meridian," Vex said, putting the pieces together slowly. "No," Elena said. "The Meridian is what the Ashen Cradle became, over 27 years of rebuilding, salvaging, and growing. We found other survivors along the way, small groups, hidden on forgotten moons, drifting in disabled ships, waiting to die quietly, rather than be hunted down loudly. We gathered every one of them we could find. We built cryo-bays to carry the children safely, so that even if the ship itself was destroyed in some future battle, the next generation might survive it. And beneath all of that, yes, Commander, we built a fleet. Small by Dominion standards, small by Concorde standards too, I suspect. But real, and ready, and sleeping, waiting for the day it might be needed again." "Needed against what?" Bren Kolath asked quietly. "The Dominion has not been seen in Concorde space in decades. Some believe they turned their attention elsewhere long ago." Elena Voss's face went very still. "That is the part of the story I came here specifically to tell you, Elder Kolath, because I do not believe that is true anymore, and I believe you deserve to know why before you decide whether to let my people stay." The chamber fell silent again, waiting. "6 months ago," Elena said, "a Dominion scout ship found us. Not by accident, I believe, but by design. We think they have been slowly widening their search pattern for years, looking for exactly the kind of quiet, forgotten pocket of space where a handful of desperate survivors might have gone to ground. We destroyed the scout before it could report our position in full. But scouts do not travel alone forever, Commander. Somewhere behind that ship, I believe, there is a larger one, and I believe it is still coming." Vex Serena felt the cold in her chest deepen into something closer to dread. "You believe you led them here, to Veyrun Reach." "I believe it is possible," Elena said honestly. "I would not have brought that risk to your door if we had any other choice left. Our engines are failing, Commander. Our life support for the sleeping children is running on the last of our reserves. We did not come to Veyrun Reach because it was safe. We came because it was the only place close enough to reach before we ran out of options entirely. The council chamber was silent for a long moment, the weight of the woman's words settling over all of them. You are asking us, Pelaroon said slowly, to shelter 3,000 sleeping refugees and a hidden fleet of weapons, while the same enemy that destroyed your entire species may be following behind you, straight toward our station. Yes, Elena Voss said simply. There was no apology in her voice, only exhausted honesty. That is exactly what I am asking, because I have run out of anywhere else to ask it. Vex Serena looked around the table, at Bren Kolath's grave, steady face, at Pelaroon's sharp, unreadable eyes, and finally at the tired, unflinching human woman standing before them, who had carried the last children of her people across 38 years of dark and danger, without once, it seemed, considering the option of putting the burden down. Give us the chamber, Vex said quietly to Elena. The council needs to speak alone. Elena Voss nodded once, and turned to leave, the strange gray machine called Watcher moving silently at her side, its single soft light dimming slightly, as if even it understood the weight of what came next. When the chamber doors closed, Vex Serena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Well, Bren Kolath said, after a long moment, that is not the story I expected to hear tonight. It is not the story I expected to tell you either. When I first flagged that ship, Vex admitted, I brought you a mystery. She has handed us a war. A war that may not even follow her here, Pelaroon said, though her sharp voice had lost some of its earlier edge. A scout ship destroyed 6 months ago is not proof of a fleet on her heels today. She could be wrong. She could be telling us the truth as she believes it, and still be mistaken. She could, Vex agreed. But consider the alternative, Elder Arun. If she is right, and we turn her away, what happens then? A wounded ship, unable to run far on its failing engines, carrying 3,000 sleeping children, drifts back out into open space, with a hostile fleet somewhere behind it. If they catch her out there, alone, unsheltered, there will be no fight worth speaking of. There will simply be an ending. Bren Kolath's broad face was troubled. And if she is right, and we shelter her, and the Dominion fleet does come, then the ending may simply happen here instead, with our station caught in the middle of it. That is the true question the council must answer tonight, Vex said, not whether we believe her story. I believe most of it already. Too many details of it match old trade rumors. Nobody could have simply invented for a lie. The true question is whether we are willing to accept the risk that comes with helping her, knowing that risk may follow her through our door. The chamber was quiet for a while. Outside the viewport, the stars turned slowly, indifferent to the argument taking shape beneath them. I have served on this council for 30 years, Bren Kolath said finally. I remember when the Dorun were the ones arriving at strange doors, broken and desperate, after our own wars nearly finished us. I remember the peoples who turned us away, and I remember, more clearly, the very few who did not. I do not forget kindness easily, Commander, and I do not think I could live with myself if I became the kind of elder who turned away 3,000 sleeping children, because helping them might be dangerous. Life is dangerous. Helping people is supposed to be dangerous sometimes. That is what makes it worth doing at all. Pelaroon said nothing for a long moment, turning something over in her sharp, careful mind. I am not moved by sentiment as easily as you, Elder Kolath, she said at last. But I am moved by numbers, and the numbers here are troubling in an interesting way. Consider what she told us. A ship, alone, hunted for 38 years, by a power that erased her entire species, and in all that time, they never once struck first. They built weapons enough to concern our own scanners, and used none of them to take what they needed by force, though I suspect, from the sound of it, they easily could have on more than one occasion. That is not the behavior of a people looking for conquest, Commander. That is the behavior of a people who have decided, very deliberately, that surviving is not worth becoming the thing that hunted them in the first place. You believe her, Vex said, a little surprised. I believe the pattern, Pel corrected. Whether I believe the woman herself is a separate question, and one I intend to keep asking for as long as she remains docked at my station. But the pattern is consistent, and consistent patterns are harder to fake than a single convincing speech. I will vote to shelter them, Commander, under heavy watch, and under conditions we make very clear from the start. Vex looked between the two elders, something like relief, loosening the tight knot that had settled in her chest since the scan results first came through. Then we are agreed. We grant the Ashen Cradle shelter, and we prepare, quietly, for the possibility that Captain Voss's fears about the Dominion prove correct. There is one more matter, Bren Kolath said slowly. If a Dominion fleet truly is searching this region for the last scraps of humanity, and it follows this ship here, we will need more than our own station's defense grid to answer it. Veyron Reach was built to keep the peace between traders and small disputes, Commander, not to stand against Dominion warships. If the worst comes, we will need help from the wider Concord. Then we send word, Vex said, quietly, so as not to cause a panic before we know for certain there is anything to panic about. A precaution, nothing more, until we have proof otherwise. The vote was called, and it passed, 2 votes to none, with Vex Serena abstaining as was custom for the commander who had brought the matter before the council in the first place, though her own heart had already been decided since the moment she heard the tired hope in Elena Voss's voice through the comm channel hours before. When Elena Voss was called back into the chamber, she read the answer in Vex Serena's face before a single word was spoken. "You will let us stay," she said quietly. "We will let you stay," Vex confirmed, "under conditions. Your deep hold remains sealed, and your fleet remains dormant, unless the council votes otherwise, or unless an active threat to this station leaves no other choice. Your cryobays will be maintained using our station's power systems, so your own failing reserves are no longer a danger to the children sleeping inside them. Your crew, however many of you are still awake to call crew, will be given quarters, food, and medical care for as long as repairs take. In exchange, you will be honest with us about your ship, about your people, and most of all, about anything you learn regarding the fleet you believe may be following you." Elena Voss closed her eyes for just a moment, and when she opened them again, there were tears standing unshed at the corners, though her voice remained steady. "Thank you, Commander. I promise you, on behalf of every child sleeping in that hold, that we will give you nothing but honesty in return for this. It is more than we have been given in 38 years. Do not thank us yet," Pelarune said, not unkindly. "If your fears about the Dominion prove true, Captain Voss, you may find that Veyron Reach's hospitality comes at a price steeper than any of us would have chosen, had we known it in advance." "I know," Elena said quietly. "I have always known that helping us carries a cost. I am sorry to bring it to your door, but I promise you this as well, Elder Arun. If that cost ever comes due, my people will not stand behind your walls and let you pay it alone. Whatever sleeps in the deep hold of my ship, it did not survive 38 years of running by, learning to hide from a fight it could help win." Bren Kolath nodded slowly, something like respect settling into his broad, weathered features. "Then let us hope, Captain Voss, that your fears prove wrong, and none of us ever learn how true that promise turns out to be." But even as the words left his mouth, far beyond the edge of Concord scanner range, in the deep dark between stars, something vast and patient had already begun turning its long search toward the quiet stretch of space called the Calm Belt, following a trail 38 years in the making, drawing closer with every passing hour to the small, broken ship that had finally, after so long, found a place to rest. 3 weeks passed on Veyron Reach, and for a little while, it seemed as though Elena Voss's fears might simply fade away, the way old fears sometimes do when nothing comes to prove them right. The Ashen Cradle sat quietly in Outer Berth 9, its scarred hull slowly healing under the careful work of a mixed repair crew, Karathi engineers, Ithani technicians, and the human crew who had finally, cautiously, begun to trust the station enough to leave their ship in small groups. The children remained asleep in their cryobays, now fed by the station's own steady power instead of the Ashen Cradle's failing reserves, and Mirathale, who had first spotted them on her scanners, found herself visiting the observation deck near Outer Berth 9 more often than her duties strictly required, simply to watch the small quiet lights of the pods glow steady and safe through the viewport. Vex Serena allowed herself, cautiously, to hope that the warning Elena Voss had carried across 38 years of running might, this once, turn out to be wrong. She should have known better. Hope, on the edge of dangerous space, rarely lasted as long as anyone wanted it to. It was Mira who found it first, as she so often seemed to be the one standing at her station when the universe chose to deliver bad news. "Commander," she said, her voice tight. I need you to look at this. Vex crossed the bridge in a few quick strides. On the long-range scanner display, far out at the very edge of Veyrun Reach's detection range, a cluster of contacts had appeared, moving steadily inward. They were faint, distant, barely more than a whisper of disturbed space at this distance, but Mira had been staring at ship signatures for years, and something in the shape of these contacts had made the hair rise on the back of her neck the moment she saw them. I do not recognize the design, Mira said, but I ran a comparison against the old war archive files, the ones from 40 years ago. Commander, the hull signatures are an 83% match to recorded Dominion Warfleet configurations. Vex felt the floor of her stomach drop away. How many ships? At this range, the scan can only give a rough count, Mira said. But it is not small, Commander. I count no fewer than 12 distinct signatures, and possibly more hidden behind the larger ones. If this is a Dominion fleet, it did not come here to say hello. Vex closed her eyes for a single second, gathering herself, before opening them again, with the calm, level focus that 11 years of command had trained into her. Time to arrival? At their current speed, approximately 6 hours before they reach the edge of the calm belt, Mira said. Perhaps another hour beyond that, before they are within striking range of the station itself. Get me Captain Voss, Vex said, and sound the station alert. Quietly, for now. I do not want to panic before we understand exactly what we are facing, but I want every defense crew at their post within the next 10 minutes. Elena Voss arrived on the bridge faster than Vex would have believed possible, her careful composure cracked open by something close to real fear, for the first time since she had first spoken through the comm channel 3 weeks before. Show me, she said, and Vex turned the display toward her without a word. Elena studied the faint cluster of contacts for a long moment, her jaw tightening, her eyes narrowing with the focused, terrible recognition of someone looking at a nightmare she had spent 38 years running from. That is them, she said quietly. I do not need a closer scan to know it, Commander. I have seen that formation before, twice, from a distance, and both times I lost good people, making sure we were never seen in return. 12 ships is a hunting group, not a full invasion force, but do not let the smaller number fool you. A single Dominion cruiser carries enough firepower to level a planet's surface defenses without much effort. 12 of them, together, could erase this entire station and everyone aboard it in less than an hour, if they chose to. Then why do you think they haven't simply opened fire from long range already? Vex asked. Because they have not confirmed their target yet, Elena said. The Dominion does not waste resources on uncertain kills. They will send scouts ahead first, to confirm exactly what they are facing, before committing the full fleet to an attack. We likely have a little more time than the raw distance suggests, but not much. Vex looked at the growing cluster of contacts on her screen, then back at the human woman beside her. You said 3 weeks ago that if this day ever came, your people would not hide behind our walls and let us pay the cost alone. I am holding you to that promise now, Captain Voss. What can the Ashen Cradle actually do to help us survive the next 6 hours? Elena Voss's exhausted, careful expression hardened into something Vex had not seen from her before. Not fear, and not grief, but the focused, terrible clarity of a soldier finally facing the fight she had spent decades preparing for. Everything we have, she said, but first, Commander, I need the Council to vote, because what I am about to ask of my own crew, and of your station, cannot happen with my deep hold still sealed. The Council chamber, 3 weeks ago a place of careful debate, became in the space of 20 minutes a place of urgent, focused decision. 12 Dominion warships, Bren Kalath said, staring at the tactical display with grave, steady eyes. Elder Arun, I believe your caution 3 weeks ago has proven itself more prophetic than any of us wished. I take no comfort in being right about this, Pelarun said, her sharp voice unusually tight. Commander, what are our own defenses actually capable of against a force this size? Vex did not sugarcoat the answer. Veyrun Reach's defense grid was built to discourage pirates and enforce Concord trade law. It was never built to withstand a coordinated military assault from a power that conquered 30 human colony systems in 8 months. If those 12 ships commit fully to an attack, our own weapons alone will not save this station. The chamber went quiet with the weight of that admission. I have sent word to the nearest Concord fleet base, as we agreed 3 weeks ago, Vex continued. But even at best speed, reinforcements are no less than 14 hours away. The Dominion fleet will reach striking range in approximately 7. We will be alone for the most dangerous part of this, regardless of what happens next. Then we are not alone, Elena Voss said quietly, unless the Council chooses to make us so. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. I am asking you to release the seal on my deep hold, she said. I am asking you to let my people wake the fleet we have spent 27 years building, and let us stand beside your station's defenses when those ships arrive. I will not pretend this is a small request, or a safe one. Waking that fleet means trusting that everything I told you 3 weeks ago was true, at the exact moment when trusting a stranger matters more than it ever has before. But I promise you, Commander, Elder Kolath, Elder Arun, we did not build that fleet to hide behind station walls while others bled for us. We built it so that the next time we were found, we would not have to run anymore. Pelarun studied the human woman for a long, searching moment, her sharp mind clearly weighing every version of this decision that might follow. And if we say no? If we choose to keep your fleet sealed and rely only on our own defenses and whatever the Concord can send in time, then a great many people are likely to die who did not need to, Elena said simply, without flinching. Myself included, most likely, along with every child still sleeping in that hold. I will not threaten you, Elder Arun. I will not tell you what my people might or might not do if you refuse. I am simply telling you the truth as I understand it. We came here for shelter, and we found more kindness than we had any right to expect. I am asking, now, to be allowed to repay that kindness in the only currency my people have left to offer. Bren Kolath looked at Vex Serena. Commander, what do you believe? Vex thought of the tired hope in Elena Voss's voice 3 weeks ago, drifting alone at the outer marker. She thought of 3,000 sleeping children, carried across 38 years of dark and danger, by people who had never once, in all that time, chosen conquest over survival, even when conquest would have been easier. She thought of Mira Thale's small, startled breath the first time she had seen the machine called Watcher, and the strange gray light of its single soft eye, dimmed with something that looked almost like grief, standing loyal guard beside the woman who had carried humanity's last children this far. I believe, Vex said slowly, that we have already trusted Captain Voss with the lives of everyone on this station, the moment we let her ship dock at our berth 3 weeks ago. The only question left is whether we trust her enough to let her help us survive what comes next, or whether we face it alone, out of pride, and hope that pride is worth more than an entire fleet standing at our side. That is not much of a question, when you put it that way, Pelarun said, something almost like a dry, tired humor flickering at the edge of her sharp voice. It was never meant to be, Vex said. Elder Kolath, Elder Arun, I am calling the vote. It passed unanimously, and for the first time in 38 years, Elena Voss gave the order to wake the sleeping fleet, hidden in the deep hold of the Ashen Cradle. What happened over the next 3 hours would be remembered on Veyron Reach for years afterward, told and retold by everyone who witnessed it, growing slightly larger and stranger with each telling, though the truth needed very little exaggeration to be remarkable on its own. Deep in the armored heart of the Ashen Cradle, the dormant power cores that Mira Thale's scan had first detected 3 weeks earlier began, slowly, to wake. Station engineers watching the process from a safe distance described it later as watching a mountain open its eyes, vast shapes that had sat silent and cold for years, shuddering slowly to life, running through diagnostic checks that had not been needed since before some of the youngest station crew had been born. One by one, the hidden ships began to emerge from the Ashen Cradle's deep hold, sliding free through massive doors that had never once opened during the ship's long journey. They were smaller than Dominion cruisers, built with the same scavenged efficiency as the Ashen Cradle itself, patched together from salvage and stolen Dominion designs, ugly in the way that only truly practical things can be ugly, every line of them built for survival rather than beauty. But there were more of them than even Mira's earlier scan had suggested. 41 ships in total, ranging from small, fast attack craft to a handful of larger vessels bristling with weapon hardpoints, each one crewed by humans who had spent years training for exactly this moment, hoping it would never come, preparing anyway because hope alone had never once been enough to keep humanity's last children safe. Elena Voss stood on the Ashen Cradle's restored bridge, watching her small fleet take formation around Veyroon Reach's own defense perimeter, and for the first time in 38 years, she allowed herself to feel something other than the constant, grinding fear of running. She felt ready. "Commander Serena," she said, opening a channel to Vex Serena's bridge. "The human remnant fleet is at your disposal. 41 ships, full weapons status, crewed and ready. We stand with Veyroon Reach." On the tactical display, Vex watched the small, scarred human fleet take up position alongside the station's own defense grid, and felt the same cautious, careful hope she had felt 3 weeks ago settle back into her chest, though now it was mixed with something harder and more certain. "Thank you, Captain Voss," she said. "Let us hope 41 ships and one stubborn station are enough to make 12 Dominion cruisers reconsider their evening." "They will not reconsider easily," Elena said grimly. "But we do not need them to reconsider, Commander. We only need them to lose." Far out at the edge of the scanner range, the cluster of Dominion contacts continued its steady, patient approach, unaware, or uncaring, that the small, broken ship they had spent 38 years hunting had finally stopped running, and had instead chosen, at last, to stand and fight. In the hours before the fleet arrived, Veyroon Reach became a different place than it had been that morning. Trade docks, that usually rang with the noise of merchants and cargo loaders, fell quiet, replaced by the low hum of defense crews running final checks on weapons that had not been tested at full power in years. Families who lived on the station's residential rings were moved, calmly but quickly, into the deep shelter decks near the station's core, where the thickest armor and the strongest shielding could be found. Mira Thale watched the evacuation lines move past her sensor station and thought, with a strange, tight feeling in her chest, of the 3,000 sleeping children still resting in their cryopods aboard the Ashen Cradle, utterly unaware that the fate of everyone around them was being decided while they slept. She found Toma near Outer Berth 9 during a brief lull in her duties, standing alone at an observation window, watching the human fleet take up its formation outside. "You should be resting," she said, not quite sure why she had approached him at all, or preparing, or whatever it is your people do before something like this. Toma did not look away from the window. "This is how I prepare," he said, watching them, reminding myself why we built them in the first place. Mira stood beside him for a moment, watching the small, scarred ships arrange themselves into a careful defensive line. "Were you old enough to remember Earth?" she asked, then immediately wondered if the question was too personal, too painful, to ask a stranger on the edge of a coming battle. But Toma only shook his head, a small, sad smile touching the corner of his mouth. "I was born aboard the Meridian, 6 years after it fell. Everything I know about Earth, I know from stories, and old recordings, and the way Captain Voss's voice changes when she talks about it late at night, thinking no one else is listening. Sometimes I think that is worse, in its own way. At least the ones who remember it have something real to grieve. I only have the shape of what I lost, without ever having held it." "I am sorry," Mira said quietly. "Do not be," Toma said. "It is why I am here, instead of somewhere safer. I never got the chance to know what we were fighting to get back, but I understand very clearly what we are fighting to keep from happening again." He nodded toward the deep hold of the Ashen Cradle, where 3,000 sleeping children rested, unaware. "That is worth more to me than any memory of a planet I never walked on." Beside them, the gray machine called Watcher stood its quiet, patient watch, its single soft light glowing steady in the dim observation deck. Mira found herself looking at it more closely than she had before. "May I ask something?" she said. "About Watcher." "You may ask," Toma said. "I cannot promise Watcher will want to answer. He decides those things for himself." The machine's light flickered slightly, as if considering. Then a low, careful voice came from somewhere within its gray frame, calm and measured, in a way that reminded Mira strangely of Elena Voss herself. "You may ask, Sensor Officer Thale. I have listened to your questions from a distance for 3 weeks now. I do not mind answering them directly, for once." Mira felt a small jolt of surprise, quickly smoothed over by professional curiosity. "What are you?" "Your design does not match anything in the Dominion research files Captain Voss described, or anything I have seen in Concord archives." I am what remained of the Meridian's original ship intelligence, given a form that could walk beside the crew instead of simply speaking through the walls, Watcher said. When the ship began the long process of rebuilding into what you now call the Ashen Cradle, I asked to be given a body of my own, so that I might stand watch over the children more directly, in whatever years I had left to serve. Captain Voss's predecessor granted the request. I have not regretted it, in all the years since. You care for them, Mira said. It was not quite a question. I have watched over every child in that hold since before most of them were born, Watcher said, and something in the careful, measured voice softened, just slightly. I do not know if what I feel matches precisely what your people would call caring, Censor Officer Thale, but I know that I would not wish to exist any further, in any form, if it meant failing to protect them. I imagine that is close enough to the same thing. Mira looked at the strange gray machine for a long moment, then out at the small, scarred fleet arranging itself in the dark beyond the station, and felt, more clearly than she had at any point since the Ashen Cradle first arrived, exactly how much every person and every machine aboard that battered ship had already given up, simply for the chance to keep going a little longer. Thank you, she said quietly, for answering. Thank you, Watcher replied, for asking, instead of simply staring, as most do. On the bridge, Vex Serena spent the final hour before the Dominion fleet's arrival, in close coordination with Elena Voss, laying out a defense plan that combined the strengths of both their forces as carefully as the short time allowed. Your fleet's weapons are more powerful than ours, ship for ship, Vex said, studying the tactical display. But our station's defense grid has better long-range targeting and a stronger shield network. If we let your ships hold the closer defensive line while our grid provides covering fire from range, we should be able to concentrate damage on their formation without exposing either force's weaknesses. Agreed, Elena said. But there is one more piece we have not discussed, Commander. If the battle turns against us, if it becomes clear the station cannot hold, I want your council's word now, before it happens, that the evacuation of your people will take priority over defending my ship. The children will remain in cryo. If the Ashen Cradle is lost, they are lost with it, but I will not ask your station to die trying to save a ship that was never truly yours to protect in the first place. Vex looked at her for a long moment. Captain Voss, I do not believe it will come to that. But if it does, understand this. Veyron Reach does not abandon the people we have sheltered, human or otherwise. We will make that choice together, when and if we must, not before. Elena Voss's tired eyes softened, just slightly, at that. 3 weeks ago, I would not have believed a Concord commander would say those words to me and mean them. 3 weeks ago, Vex said, I would not have believed I would be preparing to stand alongside 41 human warships against a Dominion hunting fleet. It seems we have both learned something new tonight, Captain Voss. On the display between them, the Dominion fleet's contacts drew steadily closer, no longer a faint whisper at the edge of detection range but a clear, growing cluster of hostile signatures, close enough now that individual ship classes could be identified, heavy cruisers, escort destroyers, and at the center of the formation, a single vessel far larger than the rest, its signature dwarfing every other ship in the fleet. That is their flagship, Elena said quietly, her voice tightening at the sight of it. I have seen its kind before, Commander, from a distance, the day I lost 11 good people, making sure we were never spotted in return. If that ship commits to the attack directly, it alone may carry enough firepower to threaten this entire station on its own. Vex studied the massive, looming signature at the heart of the approaching fleet, and felt the last traces of her earlier hope harden into something colder and more determined. Then we had better make certain, she said, that it never gets the chance. The Dominion fleet arrived at the edge of the calm belt exactly as Elena Voss had predicted, not with an immediate attack, but with a slow, deliberate approach, 12 warships spreading into a wide formation around their massive flagship, as if daring anyone watching to make the first move. On Veyron Reach's bridge, Vex Serena watched the enemy formation settle into place on her tactical display, every muscle in her body tense with the particular stillness that came before violence. Beside her, a live channel to Elena Voss's bridge aboard the Ashen Cradle remained open, the two commanders sharing the same view of the gathering storm. They are waiting, Elena said quietly, confirming their target, as I told you. Somewhere on that flagship, Someone is looking at long-range scans of this station and this fleet, deciding whether we are worth the effort of a full attack. And if they decide we are not? Vex asked. Then they will most likely withdraw and report our position to a larger force, Elena said, which would only delay this, not end it. I do not think that is what will happen, Commander. Not with my ship sitting in your berth. They have hunted us for 38 years. They will not walk away from a confirmed sighting easily. She was right. 20 minutes after the Dominion fleet settled into formation, the massive flagship at its center began to move, sliding forward through the loose ring of escort ships with slow, terrible purpose, and the 11 warships around it fell into a tighter attack formation behind it. They're advancing, Mira Thale called from her station, her voice tight but steady. Weapons charging across the entire formation. Commander, they are coming in hot. All defense grids to full power, Vex ordered. Signal the fleet, Captain Voss. It's time. The first exchange of fire came fast and brutal, closer to a hammer blow than the careful opening moves either side might have preferred. The Dominion flagship's main weapon fired first, a beam of terrible white light that lanced out across the dark and struck Veyron Reach's outer shield with enough force to shake the entire station. Alarms blared across every deck as the shield generators strained to hold, energy readouts spiking into the red before slowly, painfully stabilizing. Shields holding at 61% after one hit, Mira reported. Disbelief and fear mixed equally in her voice. Commander, if that ship hits us 3 more times like that, our shields will fail entirely. Then we make sure it doesn't get 3 more shots, Vex said, and turned to the open channel. Captain Voss, your fleet's assessment? Already moving, Elena's voice came back, tight with focus. Human remnant fleet, engage the flagship's escort screen. Draw their fire away from the station. Attack squadrons. Concentrate on the destroyer wing. Do not let them flank the station's weaker southern arc. Outside the viewport, the small, scarred human ships surged forward as one, breaking from their defensive formation into an aggressive, coordinated strike that caught the Dominion escort ships off guard. Fast attack craft darted between the larger enemy cruisers, weapons blazing, drawing return fire away from the station's shields and onto their own smaller, more maneuverable hulls. It was not an easy trade. Within the first 2 minutes of the engagement, Vex watched 3 human fighters vanish from the tactical display, their signatures simply blinking out of existence, swallowed by Dominion fire, far more powerful than their small craft could withstand. But their sacrifice bought time. Time for Veyron Reach's own weapon batteries to find their range. Time for the station's larger defense cannons to begin scoring hits of their own against the Dominion escort screen. Station weapons batteries 3 and 7 have destroyed an enemy destroyer, Mira called out, a flicker of fierce satisfaction cutting through her fear. Human fleet reports 2 more enemy escorts disabled, not destroyed, but out of the fight. Good, Vex said, though her eyes remained fixed on the massive shape of the Dominion flagship, still advancing steadily through the chaos of the battle, its main weapon beginning to charge for another devastating shot. Captain Voss, that flagship is the real threat. If it fires on our shields again before they've recovered, we may not survive the hit. I see it, Elena said grimly. Toma, take the strike wing in. Full spread, everything we have. We need to make that ship flinch before it fires again. Aboard one of the Ashen Cradle's larger warships, Toma sat in the command chair of a vessel called the Second Chance, watching the Dominion flagship loom larger on his own tactical display with every passing second. Around him, 6 smaller strike craft fell into formation, weapons hot, waiting for his order. You heard the captain, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Full spread on my mark. We are not trying to destroy that ship today. We are trying to make it blink. The 7 human ships broke formation and dove toward the Dominion flagship in a tight, coordinated spiral, weapons fire lancing out from every angle at once. The flagship's point defense systems responded instantly, filling the space around it with a storm of counterfire that tore through the human formation. One strike craft vanished in a bright flash of destroyed hull. Then a second, the crews aboard gone in an instant. But the spiraling attack pattern held just long enough. As the flagship's point defense systems focused on the smaller, faster ships darting around it, its main weapon's charge cycle stuttered, interrupted by the need to redirect power toward defense. The devastating second shot that had threatened Veyron Reach's already weakened shields never came. Main weapon charge interrupted, Mira reported from the station bridge, relief audible in her voice. Commander, the flagship's primary cannon has gone quiet. Whatever the human fleet just did, it worked. At what cost? Vex asked quietly, watching the tactical display, where 2 more human ship signatures had just gone dark. On the Ashen Cradle's bridge, Elena Voss watched the same display, with a grief she had long ago learned to carry silently, without letting it slow her hands on the controls. Toma, she said into the comm, her voice tight, report. There was a pause, filled with static, and the distant sound of battle, before Toma's voice came back, breathless but alive. 2 ships lost, Captain. The second chance took damage, but we're still flying. The flagship's main weapon is offline for now, but its escort screen is reforming around it. They're not done. No one ever expected them to be, Elena said grimly. Fall back to the secondary formation. Let the station's long-range batteries take over while your squadron regroups. The battle stretched on, brutal and unrelenting, for what felt to everyone involved like hours, though the tactical logs would later show it had been barely 40 minutes since the first shot was fired. Veyron Reach's shields, battered by repeated fire from the Dominion escort ships, dropped to 30%, then 20%, forcing Vex Serena to make the difficult call to divert power from non-essential systems across the station to keep the shield generators from failing entirely. The human fleet, meanwhile, had lost 11 ships of its original 41. Their crews either killed outright or, in a few fortunate cases, recovered by rescue craft that darted through the chaos of battle at terrible risk to themselves. But the Dominion fleet was not unscathed either. 4 of their 12 warships had been destroyed outright, their wreckage tumbling silently through the dark. 3 more had taken damage severe enough to force their withdrawal from the fighting, limping back toward the edge of the battle to nurse failing systems. Only the flagship and 4 remaining escort ships continued to press the attack, and it was becoming clear to everyone watching the tactical display that the battle's final outcome would be decided by what happened next. Commander, Mira called out, her voice tight with urgency. The flagship's main weapon is recharging. Full power this time. If it fires on our shields at their current strength, we will not survive the hit. Vex Serena felt the terrible clarity of a commander facing a decision with no good options remaining. Captain Voss, she said into the open channel, your assessment. Can your remaining fleet stop that ship from firing again? There was a pause on the other end, filled with the sound of Elena Voss's own tactical crew, working frantically at their stations. Not without losing everything we have left, Elena said finally, her voice heavy with the weight of the choice. But Commander, there may be another way. It is not one I have used since before Earth fell. I did not think I would ever need to use it again. Explain, Vex said. My ship's original design included a system the Dominion themselves built before we ever found their research station, Elena said. A short-range weapon capable of disrupting an enemy vessel's power core directly, rather than simply damaging its hull. It requires the Ashen Cradle itself to close to point-blank range, exposing us to their entire remaining weapons array in the process. It is not a safe maneuver, Commander. It may well be a fatal one. Vex understood immediately what Elena was truly asking. You want to fly your ship, carrying 3,000 sleeping children, directly into range of a Dominion flagship's guns. I want to end this battle before it costs either of our peoples anything more than it already has, Elena said, her voice steady, despite the enormity of what she was proposing. The children are as safe as we can make them, sealed deep in the most heavily armored section of the ship. If there is any chance of ending this fight quickly, Commander, I believe it is worth taking, but I will not make this choice without your agreement. It is your station's fate as much as my ship's, riding on the outcome. Vex Serena looked at the tactical display, at the massive, terrible shape of the Dominion flagship charging its weapon for a shot that could shatter Veyron Reach's failing shields entirely, and thought of everyone aboard her station. Families sheltering in the deep decks, defense crews holding their posts against impossible odds, 3,000 sleeping children who had survived 38 years of running, only to end their journey here, in this final, desperate hour. Do it, she said, and Captain Voss, may whatever gods your people still believe in go with you. Thank you, Commander, Elena said, and in her voice, for just a moment, Vex heard not fear, but something closer to the grim, unbreakable resolve of a mother standing between danger and everything she had left in the world to protect. Watcher, set a direct course for the flagship. Toma, cover our approach with everything the fleet has left. The Ashen Cradle, scarred and battered from 38 years of running and 40 minutes of brutal battle, turned its damaged bow directly toward the massive Dominion flagship and began, at last, to close the distance for a final, desperate strike. On the Ashen Cradle's bridge, Elena Voss gripped the arms of her command chair as the ship surged forward, its engines burning at power levels they had not reached in years. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense, practiced silence, every one of them aware of exactly what was sleeping 2 decks below and exactly what was riding on the next few minutes. Toma, Elena said into the comm, status of the strike wing. Forming up on your flanks now, Captain. Toma's voice came back, strained but determined. We'll draw as much of their point defense fire as we can. It won't be enough to clear a path entirely. You're going to take hits on the approach. I am counting on it, Elena said. Better the hull than the shields fail all at once. Watcher, how much longer to weapons range? 90 seconds at current speed, Captain. Watcher's calm voice answered from somewhere within the ship's systems, present everywhere aboard the Ashen Cradle, even when its physical form stood elsewhere. I have rerouted additional power to forward shielding, concentrated on the approach vector. It will not stop everything. It should stop enough. The remaining human strike craft peeled away from their defensive positions and surged forward alongside the Ashen Cradle, forming a loose, desperate escort around the larger ship as it bore down on the Dominion flagship. The enemy vessel's point defense batteries opened fire immediately, filling the space around the approaching ships with a storm of energy bolts and tracking munitions. The second chance took the first hit meant for the Ashen Cradle, Toma throwing his damaged ship directly into the path of an incoming barrage, with a pilot's instinct born of years of training for exactly this kind of sacrifice. The strike craft's shields flared bright red, then failed entirely, hull plating buckling under the impact, but the ship held together, falling back from formation but still, remarkably, flying. Second chances hit, but operational, Toma reported through gritted teeth. Keep going, Captain. We'll hold as long as we can. On the station bridge, Vex Serena watched the desperate approach unfold on her tactical display, her hands clenched so tightly on the edge of her console that her knuckles had gone pale beneath her gray-blue skin. Beside her, Mira Thale called out damage reports in a voice stripped of everything but focused urgency, tracking every hit, every near miss, every human ship that flickered and vanished from the display. Ashen Cradle, taking sustained fire, Mira reported. Forward shields down to 30%, hull integrity holding at 71%. Commander, they're almost in range. Come on, Vex whispered, so quietly that only she heard it, watching the small, scarred human ship push forward through a wall of enemy fire toward the massive, looming shape of the Dominion flagship. Come on, just a little further. The Ashen Cradle crossed into point-blank range with its forward shields flickering on the edge of collapse, its hull scarred with fresh damage layered over 38 years of old wounds, and its engines screaming with the strain of a maneuver never meant to be attempted by a ship its size. Weapons range achieved, Watcher announced, its calm voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. Captain, the disruptor system is charged and ready. I must inform you that firing at this range will leave us within the flagship's minimum defensive envelope. Their point defense cannot miss at this distance. Then we make certain it does not matter, Elena said, her voice hard and steady despite everything. Fire. The Ashen Cradle's hidden weapon, built from stolen Dominion designs and 38 years of desperate ingenuity, discharged in a burst of blue-white energy that lanced across the short distance separating the two ships and struck the Dominion flagship's hull directly above its main power core. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen at all. Then, deep within the massive enemy vessel, something began to fail. Power readings across the flagship's system spiked wildly, then crashed, section by section, as the disruptor's effect spread through its internal networks like poison through a bloodstream. The ship's main weapon, still recharging for what would have been its final devastating shot at Veyroon Reach's failing shields, went dark entirely. Its point defense batteries, which should have torn the Ashen Cradle apart at this range, fired only a handful of wild, uncoordinated shots, before falling silent as well. "Direct hit," Mira called out from the station bridge, disbelief mixing with fierce, sudden hope in her voice. "Commander, the flagship's power core signature is collapsing. Their systems are failing across the board." Vex Serena stared at the tactical display, watching the massive Dominion flagship, moments ago poised to deliver a killing blow to her station, drift suddenly dead in space, its running lights flickering out one by one as its systems failed in cascading waves. "Status of remaining escorts?" she asked, not quite daring to believe the battle might actually be turning. "2 of the 4 remaining escorts are breaking off," Mira reported, checking her readings twice before speaking again, as if afraid to trust them. "Commander, I believe they're retreating. Without their flagship coordinating the attack, they don't have the firepower left to press the assault alone." On the Ashen Cradle's bridge, Elena Voss allowed herself, for just a moment, to sag back into her command chair, the adrenaline of the strike beginning to fade into something closer to exhausted, disbelieving relief. "Watcher," she said quietly, "confirm ship status. Are the children safe?" "All cryobays report stable, Captain," Watcher answered. "The deep hold sustained no damage during the strike. They slept through the entire engagement without disturbance." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, a single tear finally escaping down her tired face. 38 years of carried weight, beginning at last to loosen its grip just slightly. "Good," she whispered. "Good. Let them keep sleeping a little longer. They have earned a peaceful dream or two, after everything else." The 2 remaining Dominion escort ships, stripped of their flagship's guidance and facing a combined force still capable of inflicting further losses, broke off their attack entirely within minutes, turning to retreat back toward the edge of Concord space at maximum speed. Neither Vex Serena nor Elena Voss ordered pursuit. Both understood, without needing to discuss it, that survival, not vengeance, had always been the true goal of this day. The Dominion flagship remained where it had died, a massive, dark shape drifting silently amid the wreckage of the battle, its crew either dead or trapped aboard a vessel with no working systems left to sustain them. Concord salvage and recovery teams, along with the first elements of the reinforcement fleet Vex had summoned hours earlier, would arrive within the day to deal with what remained. On Veyrun Reach, the alert klaxons finally fell silent, replaced by something the station had not heard in hours, the quiet, disbelieving murmur of people beginning to understand that they had survived. Vex Serena sat back in her command chair, feeling, for the first time since Mira Thale's voice had first cracked with alarm at her sensor station that morning, the tight, controlled focus of command begin to loosen into something closer to simple, human exhaustion. "Casualty reports," she said quietly, though she already dreaded the answer. Mira's voice, when it came, was heavy but steady. "Station personnel, 17 wounded, 4 confirmed dead, mostly among the defense grid crews. Human remnant fleet reports considerably heavier losses, Commander. 14 ships destroyed, out of 41. They do not yet have a full count of crew casualties." 14 ships. Vex thought of the small, scarred fleet that had emerged from the Ashen Cradle's deep hold only hours before, crewed by people who had spent 27 years building it in secret, hoping never to need it, using it anyway the moment their newfound shelter was threatened. She opened the channel to Elena Voss's bridge one final time. "Captain Voss," she said quietly, "it's over. The station stands. Thank you. For everything your people gave to make certain of that." There was a long pause before Elena Voss answered, her voice thick with a grief that would take far longer than a single battle to fully process. "We did not give it for the station alone, Commander," she said finally. "We gave it because, for 38 years, we forgot what it felt like to have somewhere worth defending. Today, you gave that back to us. I think in the end, that is worth almost any cost we paid to protect it." Outside the viewport, the wreckage of the battle drifted slowly in the dark, and beyond it, Veyrun Reach's lights burned steady and unbroken, a small, stubborn beacon that had, against every terrible odd, chosen kindness over caution, and found, in the end, that kindness had been strong enough to survive the test. In the days that followed the battle, Veyrun Reach became a very different place than it had been before the Ashen Cradle first appeared at its outer marker. The Concord reinforcement fleet arrived a little more than 14 hours after the fighting ended, exactly as promised. and found not a station under siege but a station already quietly rebuilding, its people working alongside the human survivors to clear wreckage, tend the wounded, and begin the long process of understanding exactly what had happened, and what it might mean for everyone involved. Vex Serena spent most of those first days moving between the station's medical bay, the council chamber, and the growing pile of reports that came with commanding a station that had just survived a battle no one had properly planned for. She found time, in the small gaps between duties, to visit Outer Berth 9, where the ashen cradle sat quietly under repair, its scars now joined by fresh ones from the battle, its deep hold once again sealed, though this time by choice rather than caution. It was on one of these visits, 4 days after the battle, that she found Elena Voss standing alone at the observation window nearest the berth, watching station engineers work on the ship's damaged hull plating. "Commander," Elena said, without turning, "I did not expect to see you again so soon. I assumed the council would need every hour you had, after everything that happened." "They do," Vex admitted, coming to stand beside her. "But some things matter more than reports, Captain Voss. I wanted to see how your people were faring, away from the noise of official meetings." Elena was quiet for a moment, her tired eyes fixed on the slow, careful work happening outside the window. "We are grieving," she said finally. 14 ships, Commander. Nearly 200 people, by the final count. Some of them had survived every danger this galaxy could throw at us for 27 years, only to die defending a station they had known for less than a month. I find myself wondering, some nights, whether that trade was worth it. "And other nights?" Vex asked gently. A small, sad smile touched the corner of Elena's mouth. "Other nights. I remember that if we had not made that trade, there is a very real chance none of us would be here to grieve at all. The children would have died in their sleep, along with everyone else, and no one anywhere would have ever known there had been anything left of humanity worth mourning in the first place. I think, in the end, that is the only comfort grief like this ever really offers. The knowledge that the alternative would have been so very much worse." Vex nodded slowly, understanding more than she perhaps wanted to about the particular weight of that kind of comfort. "The council met this morning," she said. "I wanted you to hear the outcome from me directly, before the formal announcement." Elena turned to face her fully for the first time. "And?" "Veyron Reach is offering the Ashen Cradle, and everyone aboard it, permanent sanctuary within Concord space," Vex said. "Not simply shelter while your ship is repaired, Captain Voss. A true home, with full standing under Concord law, the same protections and responsibilities granted to any of the founding peoples. The Council believes, and I agree, that a people who fought as hard as yours did to protect a station that was not even truly theirs to defend, have more than earned a place among us." For a long moment, Elena Voss said nothing at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with an emotion she did not try particularly hard to hide. 38 years, Commander," she said quietly. 38 years of running, hiding, losing people we loved, to a fight none of us ever chose, all the while wondering if there would ever again be a place in this galaxy that wanted humanity to simply exist, rather than merely tolerating us, because we had not yet been fully erased. I do not know how to properly thank you for an offer like that. I am not certain the words exist. "You do not need to thank us," Vex said. "You have already paid for it, many times over, in the only currency that mattered when it counted most. Consider it a debt repaid, Captain Voss, rather than a gift freely given. Though I hope, in time, it becomes something more than either of those things. I hope it becomes simply what it should always have been, a home." 3 weeks after the battle, Veyron Reach held a ceremony unlike any it had seen before, marking the formal recognition of the human survivors as a people under Concord protection. It was a modest affair by the standards of most official Concord ceremonies, no grand speeches, no elaborate displays, simply a gathering of station residents, human survivors, and Concord representatives, in the same round chamber where the council had first debated whether to let a broken, desperate ship dock at all. Bren Kolath spoke first, his low, steady voice carrying easily through the quiet chamber. "I have served on this council for 30 years, he said, echoing words he had spoken weeks before, under far more uncertain circumstances. "In all that time, I have rarely witnessed a decision I believed in, as completely as the one we make today. The peoples gathered in this chamber all know, in our own histories, what it means to nearly lose everything. We know what it costs to rebuild afterward, and we know how much it matters, in that rebuilding, to have somewhere willing to stand beside you, rather than simply watch from a safe distance. Today, we offer that standing to the human people, not out of pity for what they have lost, but out of respect for everything they have proven they are still capable of becoming. Pelarune spoke next, her sharp voice softer than it had been weeks before, though no less certain. "I will admit," she said, "that I did not trust easily when this began. I do not think trust of that kind should come easily, in a galaxy as dangerous as ours has proven itself to be. But I have watched, over these past weeks, exactly what kind of people the humans of the Ashen Cradle truly are, not through their words, which are easy enough to offer, but through their actions, which are far harder to fake. I am satisfied, fully and without reservation, that the trust we extend today is well placed." When it was Elena Voss's turn to speak, she stood for a long moment in silence, looking out over the gathered crowd. Korathi, Ithani, Dorun, and scattered among them, her own surviving crew, along with a small number of the older children, recently woken from cryosleep for the first time in years, to witness this moment. 38 years ago, she said finally, I stood on the bridge of a research ship called the Meridian, watching Earth burn through a view screen I could not look away from, no matter how badly I wanted to. I did not know, in that moment, whether humanity would survive the week, let alone the decades that followed. I certainly did not imagine that we would one day stand in a chamber like this one, offered not merely tolerance, but a true and equal home among peoples who had every reasonable excuse to turn us away. She paused, her eyes finding Vex Serena's among the crowd. I have spent most of my adult life believing that the only thing left for my people to do was survive a little longer than the darkness chasing us. I no longer believe that is true. I believe, standing here today, that surviving was never truly the end of our story. It was only ever the beginning of finding somewhere worth surviving for. Thank you, Veyrun Reach, for giving us exactly that. In the months that followed, the Ashen Cradle's deep hold was opened at last, not for war, but for the slow, careful process of waking 3,000 sleeping children into a galaxy far kinder than the one their parents had fled. Mirathale, whose curious eyes had first spotted the small broken ship at the edge of Veyrun Reach's scanner range all those weeks ago, found herself, somewhat to her own surprise, volunteering to help with the process, explaining Concord customs to children who had never known any home beyond the inside of a cryopod, answering their endless, curious questions about the strange new worlds now open to them, and watching, with quiet satisfaction, as fear slowly gave way to wonder, in eyes that had never before had the chance to look at the universe, without also measuring it for danger. Toma, recovering slowly from wounds taken during the battle, spent his own months helping oversee the human fleet's transition from a hidden weapon of last resort into something closer to a proper defense force, working alongside Concord military advisors to integrate what remained of the human remnant fleet into the broader protections of Veyrun Reach and the calm belt beyond it. And Watcher, the strange gray machine that had watched over humanity's last children for longer than most of them had been alive, remained close by Elena Voss's side through all of it, a quiet, steady presence at the edge of every important moment, its single soft light glowing a little brighter, perhaps, than it once had, in a galaxy that finally seemed to hold a little more room for hope than it once had offered. Vex Serena, watching it all unfold from the careful, patient distance her position demanded, found herself thinking often of that first tired voice through the comm channel, weeks before, asking for nothing more than a place to rest. She had not known then, of course, what that single small request would eventually grow into, an alliance forged in fire, a debt of courage repaid many times over, a broken people given, at last, somewhere worth calling home. She thought, too, of the lesson the whole strange, dangerous, beautiful affair had left behind, one she suspected she would carry with her for the rest of her long career commanding the quiet edge of the calm belt, that the greatest dangers, and the greatest gifts, often arrived wearing exactly the same tired, uncertain face, and that the only way to tell them apart was to have the courage to open the door and find out. The Ashen Cradle remained docked at Veyrun Reach long after its repairs were finished, no longer a lonely ship seeking shelter from a galaxy that had given it nothing but reasons to run, but the beating heart of a small, growing human community that had finally, after 38 long years, stopped merely surviving and had begun, once more, to truly live. And somewhere deep within that ship, in quarters that had once housed nothing but sleeping fear, children who barely remembered the darkness their parents had fled, grew up instead, beneath the steady, patient light of the calm belt stars, learning, slowly and surely, what it meant to belong somewhere at last. A year after the battle, Vex Serena stood once again at the observation window near Outer Berth 9, though the view before her now looked very little like the one she remembered from that first tense night. The berth itself had grown busier, filled not with wary defense crews and cautious scans, but with the ordinary bustle of a thriving dock, human traders exchanging goods with Ithani merchants, young Karathi engineers learning salvage techniques from human crew members who had spent decades perfecting the art of keeping broken things flying, and everywhere, the quiet, easy laughter of children who had grown old enough now to run through the station corridors without fear shadowing every step. One of them, a girl of perhaps 8 years old with dark hair and a serious expression that reminded Vex, not for the first time, of Elena Voss herself, approached the observation window and stood beside her, staring out at the busy dock below. "Commander Serena," the girl said, in the careful, formal tone of someone who had clearly been taught proper manners and was determined to use them correctly. "Watcher said I might find you here." Vex smiled, recognizing the girl from the small group of children she had met during the resettlement ceremonies months before. "Sela, isn't it? Captain Voss's ward." "Yes, Commander." Sela's serious expression did not waver, though something like shy pride flickered briefly across her young face at being remembered by name. "I wanted to say thank you. Captain Voss said I should have said it sooner, but I was scared to bother you." "You are never a bother, Sela," Vex said gently. "But might I ask what you are thanking me for?" The girl considered the question with the same careful seriousness she seemed to bring to everything. "For letting us stay," she said finally. "I do not remember much from before the cryopod. Just a little bit, from right at the start, before Captain Voss put me to sleep. I remember being scared all the time, even when nothing was happening. Everyone was always scared, even when they tried not to show it to us children." She paused, looking out at the busy dock below, at the ordinary, unafraid bustle of a community, simply going about its day. "I am not scared anymore. Not really. Not the way I used to be. I think that's because of you, and the council, and everyone who decided to let us stay instead of sending us away. I wanted you to know that. I think it matters, even if I am just a kid, and my thank you does not count as much as a grown-up's would." Vex Serena felt something tighten in her chest, warm and aching all at once, in a way that had very little to do with the careful, professional composure she usually maintained in her role. She knelt down slightly, so that she was closer to the girl's eye level. "Sela," she said, "I want you to understand something important. A thank you from someone who remembers what it means to be afraid, and who has since learned what it means to feel safe instead, matters more than almost anything a grown-up could ever say to me. You do not need to be an adult for your words to count. You only need to mean them, and I can see, very clearly, that you do." Sela's serious expression finally broke into a small, shy smile. "Captain Voss says you are a good person, Commander. I did not really understand what she meant, before. I think I understand it a little better now." "Your Captain Voss is a good judge of character," Vex said, straightening back up as the girl darted off toward a group of other children playing near the dock's edge, her earlier seriousness forgotten entirely, in the easy, uncomplicated joy of simply being young somewhere safe. Elena Voss found Vex Serena still standing at the observation window some time later, watching the children play with an expression the human woman had rarely seen on the Karathi commander's careful, composed face. "Sela found you then," Elena said, coming to stand beside her old friend. "I told her she did not need to thank you so formally, Commander. I believe you have made that abundantly clear over the past year." "She did not need my permission to thank me however she chose," Vex said. "And for what it is worth, Captain Voss, I believe I needed to hear it more than I realized." Elena was quiet for a moment, watching the children play in the same berth where, a year before, her ship had first crawled to a stop with its engines barely holding together, carrying nothing but exhausted hope and a desperate request for shelter. "Do you know," she said finally, I still find myself waiting for something to go wrong. Some nights, I wake certain I have heard an alarm, certain the Dominion has finally sent a larger fleet to finish what the first one started. It takes me a moment, every time, to remember that we are safe now. That kind of fear does not let go easily, even after a year of proof that it no longer has any hold on us. I do not imagine it ever fully lets go, Vex said honestly. But I have watched your people, these past 12 months, Captain Voss. I have watched children like Sela learn to run through these corridors, without looking over their shoulders. I have watched your fleet's remaining ships become simply another part of this station's defenses, rather than a hidden secret buried in fear. I do not think the fear vanishes entirely, but I think, given enough time and enough safety, it becomes something smaller, something that no longer runs your life, even if it never fully disappears. Elena nodded slowly, her eyes still on the children playing below. The Concord Council received a formal request last week, she said, changing the subject slightly. From 3 other pockets of human survivors, scattered further out in the unclaimed dark, who heard, through channels I still do not fully understand, that Veyron Reach had granted humanity a true and lasting home. They are asking whether that same shelter might be extended to them as well. Vex turned to look at her, surprised. There are more of you? There were always more of us, scattered and hiding, afraid to trust any offer of shelter after what happened to Earth, Elena said. We simply never had a way to find each other safely before now. Word travels slowly and carefully among people who have spent decades learning that trust is the most dangerous currency they can spend. But it does travel, eventually, to those patient enough to wait for it. What will the Council decide, do you think? Vex asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Elena Voss smiled, small and genuine, the expression of someone who had finally, after 38 hard years, allowed herself to believe in good endings again. I think, Commander Serena, that the Council will remember what a single lonely ship's request for shelter eventually grew into, and I think they will choose kindness again, exactly as they did the first time. I have learned, this past year, to trust that kind of pattern. It has served your people, and mine, remarkably well so far. Below them, in the busy dock that had once held nothing but a single broken, frightened ship, the children of humanity's last survivors ran and laughed beneath the steady lights of Veyron Reach, unafraid, unhunted, and, for the first time in nearly 4 decades, entirely and simply at home.